All right, what's up, guys? We are back again. Little podcast three-way here with myself and two of your other favorites. We got Polly Rocket and the kid Cameron Cheek on the video. Today we are going to be doing, as promised, the Natty or Not podcast presentation about my two recent prep, or not my two recent preps, my recent prep, and then my 2016 prep. So we're going to be talking about the 2016 prep, when I was enhanced, when I was using PEDs, and then the most recent 2019 prep where I went through the entire prep drug-free. Do you guys have any opening statements, anything you want to say to the people?
I'm going to guess not. Not
No.
Natty.
Not Natty?
Yeah, way too.
You're correct. All right, so those are our opening statements right there. I hope you enjoyed them. All right, so I think the biggest thing we want to answer right off the bat is this Natty or Not, because Paul got a very angry comment from a user of the Instagrams, and it was something to the effect
of, very serious.
It was like, how is he Natty? How is he claiming Natty if he used drugs in 2016 and now the 2019? So just getting it out of the way, I do not consider myself natural. The most recent prep that I did, maybe I shouldn't have wrote natural in the description or in the caption of the post. What I should have gone with was drug-free, because it was a drug-free prep. So, Paul, what is natural bodybuilding like to you, other than a waste of time?
You answered it perfectly. Yeah, there's nothing else more to say. What can I say? No, so I guess at the end of the day, I try not to let the whole like moral and like ethical dilemma shit, because there's some people in this world that are like, nah man, you took a cycle of pro hormones when you were 16, you're like 30 now, you're not natural forever. But to me, like, it's whatever the federation deems, because at the end of the day, everybody, well, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people are going to take something, and that something could be creatine or whatever. But as long as it's deemed like okay by that federation, then you're, drug free,
Yeah.
like,
what do you think, Cam?
Well, I mean, he hit it the same way I'd say, because you've got these natural divisions and sanctions where, THC is banned, but is THC actually going to enhance someone's hormone levels to a means where you're going to have a higher playing ground than someone that's not using THC? No. So I think it's just dictated based off of what that organization is allowing and not allowing.
Yeah, because I think when it comes to like personal stuff, sorry to just interject, but like, for instance, like if you ask me, like you told me you take ephedrine, right? And you're like, am I still natural? I'd call you natural. Like, what? That doesn't matter to me. But like, in the eyes of most of these natural federations or drug tested federations, you would not be considered natural unless you hadn't taken ephedrine for whatever their standard is amount of time. So
yeah, so I think I'm kind of in line with you guys in that, like, if you want to call yourself a natural bodybuilder, you need to follow the rules of natural bodybuilding. And I think when it comes to, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think this is still the case. Natural bodybuilding, the federations say that you have to be drug-free, 7 years?
I think when it comes to anabolic steroids and similar like hormone type compounds, it's something like that. Doesn't it differ a bit for like, say, stimulants and such?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think so, yeah. I think as you're closing in on a contest, and I'm not for sure because I'm not reading it off script, so don't take my word for it, but I believe it's within 90 days of use for stimulants, and I guess anything not considered a steroid.
90 days. You could still do a chunk of your prep using being technically enhanced by the rule book.
Yeah. So I think a lot of these natural federations use kind of the USADA guidelines of what's like a banned substance, the U.S. anti-doping, for those that don't know. If you want to look up the USADA banned substance list, just Google exactly that, USADA banned substances 2019, and you'll see the expansive list. There's probably some substances on there that you didn't even realize were on there. But yeah, all of your anabolic androgenic steroids are going to be on there, both oral and injectable. your ephedrine, your stimulants are going to be on there. So you'll see a lot of substances that maybe you didn't even realize were going to be banned in these organizations. Like a lot of people don't even know that in the NCAA you can get banned or you can get in trouble for taking too much caffeine. If they blood test you or if they piss test you and the levels of caffeine are too high, you can get banned from that. I'm not sure if that's the case in natural bodybuilding as well. But yeah, so that's kind of why when I went into this prep, there wasn't really much time where I kind of thought about the idea of, hey, let's do a natural show. Because if they polygraph me, I'm going to pass. Polygraphs are a joke. They don't really tell you anything. If they piss test me, I'm going to pass. I think when I competed, I was 2+ years. I was just on the opposite side of 2 years clean. So I could have easily passed any piss test or any urine test that they gave me. So could I have been a huge scumbag and competed in the OCB or the NGA or something like that? Yeah, I could have. I could have easily done something like that. But when it comes to natural bodybuilding, the rule that I look for, and it sounds like you guys are on a similar wavelength on this one, is that you want that 7-year drug-free, completely off of everything benchmark. And we'll talk about it in the Q&A. I think we got a question from someone on the Q&A, the next video that we're going to do. And we're going to talk about maybe like for someone who is 2 years or 3 years or even 1 year drug-free, is there still going to be an advantage there? But we'll save that discussion for a later date. I think next we want to kind of get into the good and the bad of natural versus enhanced bodybuilding. And this is an area where Cam has a lot of knowledge because he spent a lot of 2019 getting people pro cards that were both enhanced and natural. So Cam, what do you see as the biggest difference between the natural and enhanced side of bodybuilding? Is it something, and we can start with like early on in prep versus peaking. Let's just start with the prep as a whole. What do you notice as one of the biggest differences between the two?
To me, I feel like when you get more into the enhanced side of things, there's a bit more of a blur and a buffer, not necessarily in look, but on quantifiable things on paper. It's a lot harder to necessarily keep up with weight loss week to week. Maybe there might be stress markers that are increased a lot easier, potentially due to compounds being higher and causing those. Let's see. Fuck, I went blank. So cut it here.
Paul, just jump in. What do you think in terms of?
I really like the point you brought up about how there's a lot less blur and I guess less certainty too, and there are, I mean, even when prepping and dieting naturals, like not everything is black and white. Like you can make a change to food and maybe not see any weight loss or increased cardio, things like that. But, with an enhanced bodybuilding, those uncertainties are even more, you can just kind of bank on them happening a little more often, even in terms of like just between people, because people have different sort of habits when it comes to their use, and they're at different stages of development, so like if you have a beginner that is new to these anabolic steroids and compounds, they may grow on their prep, and that muddies the waters a little bit in terms of your data if you're collecting like body weight, or measurements, things like that. And then also like something I've noticed with females too, a lot of times you have to pay a lot less attention to the scale because they may have blocks of weeks where a very small amount of weight is lost, but there's a large visual change because, most often the female response is going to be a little different than the male response to these compounds. And then, so I think that's one of the biggest things just along the way, like not even talking about peaking or show day, is just that a lot of times you might have this perfect plan of how much weight you need to lose and what you need to do to get there. And then on paper, it very often doesn't reflect that.
And going back to too with weight changing, I've had a couple guys whose response was just not normal at all. And there may be times where I was planning, okay, maybe in 2 to 3 weeks, their deficit is going to get steeper. Well, they just went on cycle or potentially came off of a TRT prescribed dose, and now their weight is higher and their deficit is going to be steeper, and I haven't done anything. Their body weight has just increased. So could potentially give off a deeper deficit when it's not even really necessarily needed. And then, yeah, like you were saying, correlation between decisions that you're making. Things are a lot more predictable with natural bodybuilding.
Yeah. Anecdotally, I can kind of step in and add some kind of clarity to this here. So my first ever prep that I did in 2014, when I was enhanced at the time, I started my prep at about, I think I was like 207, 208, and I was probably 15 or 16% body fat. And then I got on stage just below 6% body fat at 211. So my body fat was basically 10% lower than when I started, and I had gained 4 pounds. So if you're just looking at that data from the outside, you're like, what the hell happened? And then you look at the pictures, and you're like, wow, this is crazy. And then again, with my Florida State prep, I started my prep at 232 and I stepped on stage at 227. So I lost 5 pounds over 21 weeks. That sounds like a very unsuccessful diet, but then you look at the pictures and you're just like, holy shit, that's a completely different person. Whereas with my most recent prep, I started at like 212, 213 unenhanced, and I got all the way down. I think my lowest weigh-in was like 189.8, and then I carved up and stepped on stage at 194. So I had to lose 20 pounds. I probably lost more weight in this prep, this most recent unenhanced drug-free prep, than I lost in all of my other preps put together when I was enhanced. So that definitely adds to the point that you guys are making, that the natural prep is a lot more predictable. Like there's very, very predictable weight loss from week to week. Whereas as soon as you step into the realm of enhanced and you're using different compounds, different weeks, you're switching your testosterone esters. Maybe you're using some orals now. You're using some harder, some drier drugs, and all of a sudden the scale just doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, you were talking about changes from week to week, but even day to day, given if diet is consistent day to day, for an enhanced bodybuilder, if sodium, any kind of electrolyte, or maybe water changes are different day to day, I've noticed a lot more inconsistency between scale fluctuations versus a natural who, it might just differ by a few tenths of a decimal. And with enhanced bodybuilding, it might be a couple pounds. Like I've noticed, if you have an enhanced bodybuilder and someone binges or overeats on their diet, they may be up 5 to 6 pounds just due to all the extra nutrient storage and sodium and water, versus, you've got someone on TRT doses or just naturally and they overeat, they might be up 1 to 2 pounds.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point just in general. Outside of what we already talked about, there's just a lot more complexities because these compounds affect so many different things. Like you don't just put one hormone in your body and you're like, okay, I have increased androgens, but now you're fucking with cortisol, you're messing with insulin sensitivity, you're messing with your estrogen production, and then like you said, mineral and electrolyte retention is higher. Probably muscle glycogen is higher, creatine synthase, all that storage is higher. So there's a lot more room for like variation and, both good and bad things to happen. And I think there's more room for things to change rapidly as well.
Yeah, everything's more sensitive when you're enhanced. Your physique is amplified, but so is your response to everything else.
Yeah, I go back to when I was teaching, I used to always give my students the analogy of like lifting and eating, training, competing, all of that on anabolics. But enhanced is like driving a Ferrari, whereas the natural is like driving a Prius. The same rules apply. You still have to shift through the different gears. The brake still does the same thing. The gas pedal just does the same thing. But when you're in the Ferrari and you're on the enhanced side, when you hit the gas pedal, stuff happens a lot faster and it happens to a much higher magnitude.
Like, I saw a video the other day where like I think a guy, or no, our buddy Kyle was telling us, this dude was like, dude, drive my Ferrari. And Kyle was like, I'm not comfortable. I've never driven one. And he got on one and he just tapped the gas pedal and he said the car jumped like 10 feet. Like,
Yeah. So same thing. Like when you take a refeed and you're enhanced, it's like really barely stepping on that gas pedal in the Ferrari, and things just change extremely rapidly. And if you're not ready for it, if you've never driven the Ferrari or a fast car before, it can be pretty shocking. What about changes on the training side in your enhanced versus natural? I can come in with the anecdotal again, and then you guys can kind of comment from there. I think the biggest change that I noticed from going from enhanced to natural was just like the level of dumb fuckery that I was like able to get away with when I was enhanced versus natural. I remember like my training back then was much different. I was more in the like Israel camp of like, let's just add volume every single week. I was running a linear progression where I was adding sets and load to the bar every single week. And I was able to progress because I had a lot of help on my side. And then I came back to the natural side of things. And I was like, man, if I trained like that, I would absolutely break in half. So what I did was I kept my set static. I tried to add reps, maybe small amounts of load from here to there. And I look back on some of my old training videos of like these max outs. Like I remember, I think I was like 8 or 9 days out from competition and I did 365 on back squat for 6 sets of 12. And then I worked my way up to a beltless 495, 20-pound PR. And this was 9 days out from competition. I'm like, man, if I tried that now, natural, I would just snap in half. So what do you guys notice in terms of natural versus enhanced? The biggest differences on the training side of things? Is it rate of progression? Is it style of progression? What is it?
So I'll just give feedback on kind of what I've noticed and what to watch for, because it'll be, I'm sure, minute to what everything Paul's going to say. But when we were talking about how at the start of prep, maybe weight doesn't change from the start and end with an enhanced guy, or just doesn't change that much, maybe because they might be growing into a show. So when we're looking at relative strength, pretty much pound for pound, how strong you are, when it comes to natural bodybuilding, I've noticed, yeah, their absolute strength might go down, but their weight's most likely going to go down a lot more too, compared to an enhanced bodybuilder. So, of course, the recovery is going to be better on enhanced side of things, but when their weight's not dropping down as much, I've found that strength is going to maintain and hold and potentially increase for a while until you really start digging into things. When natural bodybuilding, I'm more so just looking pound for pound. Are we kind of holding these strengths same, or the same strength measurements as things progress?
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you're on the natural side and you hold 85 to 90% of your strength from day one to the end of prep, you've done a really, really good job. If you've gotten stronger, your programming is absolutely beautiful. If you get weaker and you're enhanced during a prep, you done fucked up. You did something terribly, terribly wrong. You should be setting PRs.
I think it depends, man. But, you know, when it comes to natural,
hit me with that nuanced, it depends bullshit.
but
I want to hear hot takes. What's your hot take?
no, I think with naturals cutting, you know, if you have the luxury of sort of taking your time and doing the whole like half pound to a pound a week on average, they tend to do well and sometimes progress earlier into a diet. But I think, you know, everybody sort of hits that point where they just can't, you know, produce the same kind of work and the same numbers. And then with enhanced guys, you know, there's definitely that advantage, but you know, there's just so many. It depends, you know. Like if you're a guy that has 40 pounds to lose, like even if you're enhanced and you know juiced to the gills, you might lose a little strength, man. You know, if you're trying to do that in 16, 20 weeks, that's a lot of weight to lose. Yeah, man. So I think just in general, like not even, I guess this goes for prep too, kind of like what you said. I think you can get away with more, but you can also get away with less and progress. It kind of widens, you know, what you can do and progress with and get away with. But also, I think what a lot of people just like to consider like, okay, this guy's using drugs, so he can just do more. But like, sometimes more isn't that much more. Like when you're really big and really fucking strong, like the beating that you take in the gym is just so much greater in magnitude that like you can't assume, like, let's say for an example, you're natural and you can usually get away with training for 4 to 6 weeks and then deload. And then you reach a certain size, you decide to go enhanced, and then you put on over some time 20, 30 pounds of muscle. You might be right back in that same spot where you can only train for 4 to 6 weeks or less, and hit a point where, maybe you're deloading every 4th or 5th week, because the magnitude of stress that you can put on yourself in the gym is so much greater now. Muscle damage is greater. Your joints and tendons are taking a larger beating. So sometimes I think what a lot of people find, and I know I've heard Mike Israetel say this too, is that sort of like the advanced enhanced bodybuilder, the drugs almost just help them keep pace with like what their recovery was when they're natural, I guess, in a sense, versus really, like, okay, like I'm 260 and, I'm training with huge poundages, but I'm on drugs. I can train for 6 months straight without a deload because I'm just taking like 8 grams of gear, like that doesn't happen. So.
And another thing too, I don't care if someone's enhanced or natural. From the start of a prep to the end, if you're getting peeled, something's going to change. And whether that be the amount of sets per week that you can do as a natural, or how many working weeks you have before it comes time for a deload, and then even on an enhanced side, if you can still tolerate the same amount of volume, good. Like that's good. But something is most likely going to have to change, whether it be exercise selection due to daily fatigue accumulation from more complex movements. But most likely something is going to have to change so that they're able to get from the start of the workout to the end of the workout without taking a hit from just whether it be huge, more complex and taxing movements.
I think Thomas Neal made a point in the group chat the other day about shifting intra-session volumes, or pushing down intra-session volumes as you get further into a prep, just to increase the quality of work that you're getting. I think that's kind of the point that you're making, Cam, there, where like there's less substrate going in, like you're eating less food, you're expending more energy. Something has to change. And if it's lowering the amount of work that you're doing so that you can maintain the quality of the work that you're doing, whether you're natural or you're enhanced, you're going to benefit from that.
Yeah. At the end of Echo Johnson's prep, which we had to dig her down super hard. Her cardio was way up in the roof. We got to a point where she was doing her compound and accessory in the morning and her small, simple movements in the evening, just because she wasn't able to get through towards the end of the workout without just being completely dead. And we went through a couple weeks of doing that and comparing things, and her performance was a lot greater than where it was if she just went all in one go.
Yeah, man. I mean, dude, I think we can all think back to a point where we're dieting and you're like staring at the ground between sets and you look down at your watch and you're like, holy fuck, it's been 8 minutes. I need to do another set. And then you're like an hour and a half in and you're like, I still have so much more shit to do. And you just fucking don't, you could, but you just don't want to muster up the energy, or the quality goes down. And then I really like how you brought up the cardio too, because that's huge. As that cardio goes up, if you end up at the end of your prep and you're doing near an hour of cardio or over an hour of cardio a day, like that cuts into your gym time too. And then not only that, you might even start considering certain strategies like myo rep sets, rest pause, stuff like that. Just so, because, as much as like I love doing curls and lateral raises, like nothing to me is juicier than like a delt pump and a try and buy pump. But at the end of my workout in a hard cut, like you're just at a point where you're like, let me just myo rep these motherfuckers and go home. Like,
yeah.
So whether you're on the natural or the enhanced side, these are all going to be kind of good strategies to use coming the end of prep when the suffering is really hard. I think that's something that I used more in this prep was the myo rep, the rest pause, to kind of get the most bang.
The small stuff.
Yeah. I'm gonna be in the gym. I want to be in the gym for 45 to 60 minutes. I don't want to be there for 2 hours, like you said, staring at the ground for 10 minutes at a time. Let's just get this shit done. Let's make sure it's high quality work. Let's just stimulate the muscle enough so that it sticks around. I'm not going to be gaining shit. So let's do the amount of volume that it takes to maintain what I've got so I can get my cardio done, get my calories burned, and I can get the hell out of the gym.
That's tough too, because if you spend most of your training year doing like around 20 sets a week per body part, it's hard to just kind of bite that bullet and be like, all right, 10 sets a week, 12 sets a week, this muscle that is, better developed, or that maybe I just don't care about that much, maybe 6 to 8 sets a week. Like,
unless you're peeled, then it's a blessing.
Those are people always say when you're really, really shredded at the gym, like, oh man, you look so good. It must be so fun to look like that. Nah, ain't nothing fun about this.
Fun enough to spend like 20 minutes taking photos and like waste a shit ton of time, but like not actually work out.
It's fun for 30 minutes of the day when you have a pump, and then your pump fades and you go home and you're hungry. And then for the other 23 and a half hours, you're just miserable because you can't eat and you don't sleep.
That was one thing I did want to bring up that I don't think a lot of people consider when we talked about strength loss. What's really neat as an with enhanced individuals is sometimes you can play with compounds. For instance, let's say somebody's dieting and it's not for a show, but it's the tail end of their diet, right? Or for somebody that is in prep, it may be in the middle or some point where it's appropriate so that it doesn't affect their look on contest day. You give them very watery, volumizing compounds such as, let's say, D-ball or some sort of nandrolone. Sometimes you get like and it's more for the psychological factor, I think, than producing actual gains. But you get sort of like a buffer to where strength may kind of go back up for a little bit or maintain a little longer, and you stop seeing that decrease for a while.
Yeah, I mean, you've got more leverage under the bar if you're putting on any water weight from that, which is expected.
Yeah, it changes your range of motion.
And most of the time,
and then also, some of those compounds might even play into like energy systems, so
tension of electrolytes and things inside the cell too. You might have
glycogen, creatine, all those things. So that's something neat that I don't think a lot of I don't hear talked about too often.
It's a strategy that people are scared of because they think that they're going to hold water at the end of a diet. But what people forget about we'll just use bodybuilding and contest prep. Let's say it's not just a regular diet. Contest prep, if you cut those compounds at 2 weeks out, you've got more than enough time to allow your body water to regulate. Even if you cut it at 1 week out for peak week, you could still get all the extra water retention off, and you still have that 4 or 5 weeks of quality training that led up to that point. It's a psychological break for them. And it's just fun. It's fun at the end of a prep to still retain some of that strength and be able to lift in that fashion. So yeah, I definitely agree.
It's really neat, like when people use that strategy and they're a little smarter, it's less of that mental fuckery of one, you're going to look a little bigger while you're dieting, but also you're just not going to see the scale crash,
Yeah. And that's
most definitely.
Relative strength comes into play, like you were saying. You're maintaining or potentially going up. But everybody wants to be peeled each weekend when it's time for an Instagram physique update. So I guess that's more important.
Damn straight. Flat as a pancake, holding water. But wait till I pull water, dog. Shit's going to get real. As soon as I pull water.
Higher prep.
Pull water and sauerkraut load. If you don't understand, you haven't been hanging out with us long enough. Stick around. You'll understand the sauerkraut load. All right, Cam, you want to move down the list? What do we want to talk about next?
Your drug history and your problems.
Oh, God. Those go hand in hand. All right, so what do you want to know about my drug history?
When did you first start becoming superhuman?
When did you leave humanity behind?
When did I become a man? All right. So I started in. I had a friend who did a contest in 2012, and he messaged me when he was done. He placed well. He looked great. He messaged me when he was done, and he said it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. And I was like, okay, I bet I can do that. So I started doing some research on bodybuilding. I started looking at the NPC. I was on the forums, and the idea was, or what I got from the forums was, hey, if you compete in the NPC, it's pretty much use drugs or you're going to get left behind. So that's when I started doing my research. So I spent about all of 2000. Yeah, I spent pretty much all of about 2013 just doing as much research as I could. And then I took the dive in 2014 in preparation for my first contest. So I started cycling on my way to the Mid-Florida Classic in 2014. I placed second in novice and then second in heavyweight. My cycle for that show was 20 weeks long. The first half of the cycle, I ran 500 milligrams of Sustanon with, I believe, 400 milligrams of Deca, no orals there. And then the second half of that prep, I switched over to test prop at 400 milligrams, and then I took 350 milligrams of Tren Ace weekly. And then for the last 8 weeks, I took 50 milligrams of Anavar daily. The last 10 weeks, I was also taking ephedrocaffeine and aspirin, so just an ECA stack there as well. So that was the first time I ever cycled. It was very interesting. I didn't really know what to expect. I kind of just dove in there, but I enjoyed it, so I stuck with it. After that show, I didn't think that it was worth it to blast and cruise. Lesson learned there. I came off, basically got fat, everything crashed, my training went to shit, and then I was like, all right, well, 6 months of complete garbage training has gone by. Let's do another contest prep. So I started prepping for the 2015 Tampa Bay Classic. Very similar cycle there. The majority of my cycles were anywhere from 400 to 600 milligrams of a test base with 300 to 500 milligrams of some sort of assistance compound. My favorite was the 19 Nors. I liked Deca. I liked Tren. The cycle for Tampa had some EQ in it as well in the first half at about 400 milligrams. I ended up placing first in heavyweight, second in the overall in that. The next year I came back after a cruise in the off season, felt much better. The next year was the 2016 Florida State prep. So what I did in the 2016 Florida State prep that would be very valuable to this podcast is I recorded all of my data. So I recorded everything that I did. I recorded all the compounds that I took, the dosages that I took, what my macros were, what kind of cardio I was doing. And then I recorded all of that and I saved that. So do you want